very warm welcome back to the channel, and thank you for watching once again. If you are the kind of person that wants to know more details about any given subject, but you don't have time to go and read through all of the documents yourselves, then you're in luck, because people like me and other law tubers, as people refer to us, go through these documents in great detail and aim to give you a good explanation in simple terms to understand exactly what's going on. But before that, you might just look to the headlines. And in this video, I'm talking about why that might not always be the best idea if that's all you do, if you really want to know the truth about what's going on. Moving to my browser here, you can see in this window that I've got open, just with a few search terms, brings up all of the headlines, which are making a big deal of the headline that Johnny Depp tried to introduce nude photos of Amber Heard into evidence. So all of these headlines here seem to suggest the same thing. Depp tried to show nude photos of Heard. Depp wanted nude photos of Amber Heard. Amber Heard claims Depp planned to submit nude photos. Johnny Depp sought to submit nude photos of Amber Heard. Johnny Depp wanted to submit, and so on and so on and so on. So all of these headlines effectively seek to say the same thing. So if you only relied upon these headlines, you would think to yourself, wow, that's quite a statement for the media to make, that he tried to introduce these photographs. However, all of that lacks context, and if you caught our live stream, you might have heard a lot more detail behind that. So I'll link that live stream in the description below. But in this video, just a very brief overview of the things that we said in that video, because that's not the whole of the story. In fact, it goes even further into arguments back and forth, motions in limine. And in fact, if I were to give you some of the broader context that this was an argument in the reverse, ultimately, because Amber Heard's lawyers made lots of different arguments, what they wanted in evidence and what they did not want in evidence. And it was in response to one of those arguments that Depp's lawyers mentioned these photographs and quite explicitly made a reverse statement to what you see in these headlines. So let's look at what those motions in limine were just for a moment. And let's look at the things that Amber Heard's lawyers were trying to put in or keep out of evidence. So this is defendant and counterclaim plaintiff Amber Heard memorandum in support of motions in limine. Of course, this was confidential under seal until just recently. So let's look at some of these arguments, shall we? Just to give you a broader context of what really happened behind the scenes, and is not limited to these headlines, which are, as the title of this video suggests, headlines, headlines, headlines. So these arguments, first of all, they argue the statement from the headline in the Washington Post should be excluded and redacted. Well, we all remember what that Washington Post headline was, and you can probably agree that that probably shouldn't have been excluded and redacted because it was central to the case. But let's talk about that in another video. Secondly, any evidence, testimony, or allegations of criminal conduct against Amber Heard should be excluded based on the rules of evidence and relevance. Now, obviously, rules of evidence and relevance are fine, but if it goes to somebody's credibility, perhaps they shouldn't. But let's not forget the fact that one of these arguments was that any evidence, testimony, or allegations of criminal conduct against her should be excluded. Moving on, evidence respecting either her or Johnny Depp's pledges or donations should be excluded. Again, these were fairly central to a lot of people, and certainly it sounds like they were to the jurors, because the juror that spoke out, if it really was a juror that spoke out, said that this just didn't hang true and that this played a significant part in their deliberations. So nonetheless, they wanted this evidence to be excluded. Remember, we haven't got to the photographs yet. We'll be coming to that. But we're just looking at things that they wanted in or they wanted out of evidence. Now, let's look at this next bit. They argue that Johnny Depp should be precluded from introducing any evidence on subjects which attorney-client or work product privilege has been asserted. So a fairly broad argument as to work that should be excluded. Moving on, Ms. Heard should be permitted to designate testimony from Tracy Jacobs in 2 other litigations filed by Johnny Depp. Now, just pause for a moment. I have spoken about this in other videos, but just going back for a moment. Amber Heard's lawyers wanted any evidence and testimony or allegations about her criminal conduct excluded on the basis of relevance. However, at the same time, they argued that they should be permitted to designate testimony from Tracy Jacobs, remember I've spoken about in another video, from other litigations years beforehand that Johnny Depp filed whilst he was represented by other counsel. So the phrase having it both ways springs to mind here. They want evidence of criminal conduct excluded on the basis of relevance against Amber Heard, but they want to be permitted evidence by somebody from some other litigation, which was actually not really relevant to this case. They want that to be included. Okay, moving on. Now, this, I believe, is where we're coming to matters around the photographs, evidence of the following irrelevant personal matters and prior irrelevant litigations and legal matters, and so on and so forth. So let's scoot down. There's lots of different arguments here, but let's scoot down to the ones that I have highlighted. Here we are. Here are some of what they wanted excluded. So evidence of irrelevant personal matters likely to distract the jury. Now, ordinarily, yes, I would agree with that. For example, first, nude photos or comments about doing certain activities would be highly distracting and unfairly prejudicial to the extent that they portray her badly. I won't read those words out. But this is where those headlines have come from, because this was the argument. Amber Heard's lawyers wanted this excluding from evidence. However, the response to that from Depp's team was as follows. Mr. Depp does not, underscored, currently anticipate introducing evidence of nude pictures, though it is possible to envision a scenario in which such photographs might become relevant in the context of this case. For instance, to show a lack of visible injuries, as a result of which the court should not finally resolve this issue in limine. So let's just go back over that again. Amber Heard's lawyers were saying they want to exclude irrelevant personal matters likely to distract the jury, including these nude photographs and so on. The headlines, if you remember, are quite starkly saying that he wanted to introduce nude photos, tried to show nude photos, tried to include nude photos, sought to submit nude photos, and so on. However, we come to the response to this motion in limine. Mr. Depp does not currently anticipate introducing evidence of these pictures. So this just goes to show that if you only look at the headlines, you only get a partial picture, pun intended. So when you look into the documents behind this, and this is what we seek to do and why we are producing these videos and why we are concentrating on these issues, because this is the very thing that you don't get when you only look at headlines. A little bit like we didn't have time to discuss in the live stream, but there are many cases that come to court. And for example, you might see news companies reporting the opening speech of a criminal trial. That will obviously and necessarily paint the defendant in that trial in a very bad light, because it's the prosecution's case. It's the case against the defendant. The prosecution will bring all of the arguments that they seek to prove against said defendant. And so if you listen to or you read the headlines just about that opening speech and you believe them, then of course it's going to put that defendant in a very, very bad light indeed. because there's no response at that stage. In fact, there's no response until the cross-examination of prosecution witnesses. So the way that's going to work is the prosecution are going to open the case with a speech, explain to the jury what this case is about. We say this happened. And that's the opening speech. The newspapers go away and write it. Now, the rules on reporting are quite clear. It should be unbiased, clear, and factual reporting only. And the news outlets are deemed to have permission to do this without seeking the permission of the court first, whereas a member of the public should seek permission of the court before reporting on a case. A legal commentator, such as myself, I would quite easily be designated as a legal commentator. I am a barrister, I am a lawyer, and if I comment on a case, I'm deemed to be, under the rules, I'm deemed to be permitted to do so without first seeking permission of the court. But again, so long as that is a factual representation of the case and without opinion, because to provide opinion could potentially jeopardize a case, even if the verdict has been released, but sentence has not yet happened. That's why I don't comment on cases that have been decided by a jury, but where the defendant has not yet been sentenced. So moving back to the issue at hand, if you read headlines or you listen to headlines and there has not yet been the opportunity for those papers to report on the cross-examination or on the defendant's evidence and case against it, then you're going to get a one-sided view. That's not to say that the newspapers are wrong necessarily, because if they are accurately reporting the opening case, then they are accurately reporting what the prosecution case is against that defendant. It doesn't mean it's all right. It doesn't mean that you should believe every word of that opening case. That is just the case as it has been opened to the jury. So let's not confuse an opening statement or even the evidence of witnesses with the absolute truth. Remember, the truth is only decided by a jury and only upon the evidence that is based. And then the jury's verdict is sometimes open to appeal, because the jury might come to a verdict on certain evidence which perhaps shouldn't have been before the jury. And that is very often the case that an appeal is based upon. So a jury may come to a verdict upon evidence which on appeal is then ruled should not have been in evidence, and therefore the jury's conviction, for example, is unsafe. And in those circumstances, the conviction is quashed. So that is the very basis upon which many appeals are brought. So in this video, I wanted to just draw attention back to the way these headlines can give a very one-sided view of what happened behind the scenes. And so the argument that Johnny Depp sought to introduce these photographs has made headlines is, as my video suggests, headline grabbing. That's not to say it's wrong, but that's not to say it's wrong, but at the very least, this is a fuller explanation of what really happened behind the scenes. There are lots of arguments, and also, by the way, none of this is to say that Amber Heard's lawyers were wrong in what they were doing. They were fiercely representing their client. They were making the arguments as best they possibly could to give their client the best possible chance of winning the case, such as excluding evidence they didn't want in, trying to introduce evidence that would assist them, and these arguments go back and forth, and naturally none of this was before the jury, because if the jury did hear all of these arguments and they did consider all of this evidence where it shouldn't have been considered, that would obviously sway the jury in ways that they should not be swayed. But I hope this provides a little bit of a deeper understanding as to what goes on behind the scenes and what's behind these headlines, and how you can understand the arguments behind a case before those headlines are written. So with that in mind, I would invite you to watch our live stream. Join as a channel member. We've got a whole catalogue of back live streams going back many, many, many months, and many hours that you can indulge of these live stream answering all sorts of questions. Please do remember to like this video and subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already done so. I am doing a Q&A. I'm in the middle of filming it. It will go on Black Belt Secrets, which I will link in the description below. And you can watch that too and fill in your questions that you want me to answer. And I will address as many of them that I can over on Black Belt Secrets. So with that, I thank you for joining me. I thank you for your attention on this Saturday morning. At least it's Saturday morning for me. And I wish you a very pleasant day. And thank you for watching.